With 4 games remaining the rest of the season here for this Broncos team, they are in control of their destiny. How do they stack up against the rest of the AFC after 13 weeks? We break that down and much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it is your team every day. Thank you so much to everyone in Broncos Country for making Locked On Broncos exactly what it is, whether you're first, we make us your first listen of the day, or you're an everyday, or if you're not doing that already, make sure you do that so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team every single day, all year long. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. You can check out my written work over there, milehighsports.com, alongside all the film breakdowns of the All-22 that we do over there. Joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantly orange.com, and writer over there, NFL Spin Zone, where you can check out his work here. And Broncos Country, here's what you can expect on today's episode of the show here. We'll wrap things up today by looking at how the Broncos can get the rookies involved a little bit more in these final 4 games of the season, especially as a playoff possibility is very strong here for this team. We'll talk about the Broncos rookie report card from the 2024 class. What are our initial impressions through 13 weeks and where can they continue to grow? But we'll kick off today's episode of the show by talking about the state of the AFC and where the Broncos lay within those plans with 4 weeks left in the season after 13 weeks in the NFL. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Sayre, it's quite simple. 4 games remain here for this Broncos team coming up. Get some quality opponents as well. They control their own destiny. But look, I don't care if it's Destiny's Child, Tenacious D, and the Pick of Destiny. They got to take care of business in these final 4 games here. I think it's very clear when we look at the AFC after 13 weeks of action.
It is, Cody, because, if the season ended today, obviously the Broncos would be heading to Buffalo for their wild card playoff matchup, which I think as of right now, Buffalo is maybe one of 2 teams that you really don't want to play in the AFC playoff race, right? I think Buffalo right now, and then obviously for some reason, Cody, I'm still on Baltimore as a team that I would not want to have to go play right away. But of course, Baltimore is a team that the Broncos could feasibly jump by the time they're done with their next game. So it's going to be interesting to see. The AFC right now is not loaded. Let's just put it that way, right? Because let's break down the teams that are behind the Broncos, the teams that are chasing the Broncos right now, right? Obviously, the Colts, they're 6-7. They won in kind of miraculous fashion against the New England Patriots. They're 2 games behind with 4 games left to play. And the Colts are also on a bye this week. The Miami Dolphins, they feel irrelevant to me as of right now, Cody. They're 5-7. I don't feel like the Dolphins are going to be a factor as the season goes along. But hey, I mean, they've got 5 games left. So you never know what could happen. The Bengals are 4-8. I just feel like that 8th loss that they got, it's one too many, right? For them to make some noise here in the final 5 weeks of the season. So those are the teams that are behind Denver right now. If somebody was 6-6, or if somebody was 7-5, or whatever the case may be, I'd be like, okay, the Broncos have a little something to be worried about. Every single one of these teams is 2 games below 500 or worse.
Well, and I think when we look at it as well, for where Denver is at right now in the 7th seed, it's a great spot to be in. But it makes that Week 15 matchup because, look, the Broncos, the Colts, and the Ravens, they're on the bye week at the same exact time right now. So you open up against the Colts. That's going to be a must-win. I think Denver wins that game. If that happens, okay, they're going to be in the postseason. I think that would become the reality. That would be a fun thing to watch. Because I think I saw it somewhere on social media that if Denver wins against the Colts and Miami loses 1 game, Denver's going to be in regardless of what happens. Not sure if that's true. I know someone can fact check us as you're listening or watching here. Obviously Locked On Broncos, but Denver's postseason ambitions are very, very relevant right now. And look, they were in the hunt last year. It's nice that they're not in the hunt graphic, that they're actually in a position right now. Now, obviously, the Ravens are coming off of a loss to the Philadelphia Eagles in Week 13. That's got them at a point now. They're also on a bye week right now. I think there's some interesting matchups. Okay, look, Kansas City, obviously the number 1 seed right now in the AFC. We all know that. Buffalo right behind them here. It makes this week's game very interesting because obviously, the Bills play the Rams. the Chiefs, they play the Chargers. And it's like at this point, who is Broncos country wants them to end in a tie, right? But ideally, I think the way you look at it, are you hopeful that maybe Kansas City wins this game just because it's like, all right, it puts the Broncos and the Chargers with the same exact record at that point, and then you have a head-to-head that you're going to obviously have after that Week 15 matchup. You're going to get that Thursday night matchup in primetime. Once again, I don't know how it's going to go here, but Denver's in a position right now, Sarah, where, hey, it's like, they're in the 7th seed. They may not end up as the 7th seed when it's all said and done. There's a chance they can go up to the 6th. There's a chance that they could go up to the 5th spot. It's all about how things kind of matriculate towards the end of the season. So I think that's an interesting matchup that we're going to be watching for this week, as obviously the Broncos enjoy their bye week. Buffalo's a tough team. I'm in agreement with you. Would you rather right now, sir? We kind of had this discussion on the AFC squad show as we're looking at the playoff picture. There is a possibility here where, and I think this is probably how it's going to, ultimately formulate. If the Chiefs drop a game, look, they got the Chargers. The Chargers can be a tough matchup for them, but they also have to play the Steelers on Christmas Day. Would you rather Buffalo jump frog into the 1 seed? Would you? I almost feel more confident that I would like to see Denver. If they stay at the 7 seed, I would like to see Denver play Kansas City in the playoffs, which look, I know it's a tough ask, but it's like, I don't think the Broncos fear that. And look, I think that would be intriguing. If you had a match up between either Buffalo, Pittsburgh, or Kansas City in the first round in the wild card, what matchup would be a little bit more appealing for Denver? I would say it's Kansas City out of those 3.
Yeah, I think it would go in order: Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and then Buffalo in terms of the order in which I would want to play those teams on the road, because obviously Kansas City is a very familiar opponent. Like, it's so tough to beat teams twice or even 3 times. As I know, we saw the Broncos with Peyton Manning. They did that. I think they did that to the Chargers one time. But it's very difficult to beat a team 3 times. And so let's say Kansas City does get a win against Denver week 18, or even if the Broncos get a win against Kansas City, it's tough to beat a team twice. So yeah. I would say playing that kind of a game, you got a common opponent, them like the back of your hand, what you're game planning for. Broncos didn't necessarily game plan for Russell Wilson earlier this year. I mean, I know they know Russell very well, but he's operating a new offense and things like that. So I would say Kansas City, Pittsburgh, he is playing well, and their receivers are balling out for him as well, Cody. You look at this AFC playoff picture right now, 2 playoff spots are already locked up. I think that's important to note here. Kansas City and Buffalo, they're in. Like, a number of teams, the Broncos actually eliminated a number of teams from the playoffs when they won, because they won their 8th game and eliminated, like, I think the Jaguars, I think the Raiders were officially eliminated at that point. So the Broncos eliminated a number of teams, but you look at this playoff picture, 74% chance as of right now that the Broncos make the postseason. Everybody else in the AFC playoff picture, the other 4 teams that are currently above Denver, they are all at 96% or above. So the shifting is going to come, as you said, whether or not the Broncos are the 7th seed, whether they might climb all the way up to the 5th seed. And that's where I would be saying, like, yes, I would be rooting for the Chiefs to win this coming weekend, but then can Pittsburgh get the job done later on, right? You want to see the Broncos jump the Chargers, but then maybe Pittsburgh can knock Kansas City down off that number 1 spot. I'd be interested to find out, because there's a lot of time left. I mean, 5 weeks is a lot of time. There's so much that can happen, and the matchups, like you said, for these teams, they're not getting any easier. Baltimore, they play in one of the toughest divisions in football. Like, Kansas City's got a tough road ahead. Even the Broncos obviously have some tough games upcoming. But look, if you can get the Chargers to lose this weekend, that means that Thursday night matchup, you're going to be at least looking at potential of matching in the win or loss column. So very interested to see what happens here for the Broncos this weekend without even playing.
Let's give a best case scenario postseason picture here for the Broncos. I think best case would be them getting to the 5th seed. I like them matching up against the Houston Texans right now. The Texans aren't playing great, but by default, that division is god-awful. So, of course, they're going to be at the top of their division right now. I know the Colts are trying to climb in, but obviously, I think there's a 2-game separation between Indy and Houston from that regard. I think they still have to play each other, if I'm not mistaken. So there's something to monitor with that. But I think everybody right now would like to say, like, hey, get the 5th seed, face Houston, because they're going to be the division winner more than likely in the worst division. So they have to stay at the 4th seed. They're not going to drop down any further unless Indy were to jump up. So I think that would be best case scenario here for the Broncos. And certainly just the overall playoff picture is exciting this time of the year. You talk about like the Chargers and the Ravens. Look, the Chargers banged up a little bit. Ladd McConkey's banged up. No J.K. Dobbins for them right now, and that's something I think we'll have to monitor over the next couple of weeks here. The Ravens, Broncos have the same exact record at this point, but I think you're running into a situation here where it's like, hey, because the Broncos lost to the Ravens, they got the tiebreaker. So Denver's in a good spot right now. They just got to focus on, hey, come out, beat the Indianapolis Colts. It's not going to be an easy matchup. It's going to be tough. Like that Colts team, they're gritty, they're resilient. It's going to be a tougher matchup, I feel like, than the Cleveland Browns. So definitely a lot to watch for here in the next coming week as we build up to that Week 15 showdown. That's going to be a big one here. But Broncos country, one thing we are going to do, we're going to look at the Broncos rookie class of 2024 through the first 13 weeks of the season. We're going to have our grades, talk about what we liked, maybe where they can improve as they go on through these final 4 games of the season. We'll break that down and more here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. And as you all know it, Broncos Country, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and they want you to get ready to tackle the NFL this season, especially as Week 14 approaches. There's a wide variety of exciting games, including the AFC West. You have the Chiefs versus the Chargers. And now, since you get to watch football on Sunday without the stress of a Broncos game happening, you can enjoy it with the FanDuel Sportsbook app. And right now, as a new customer, you can bet $5 and get $150 and bonus bets if you win. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over there at Hillsdale College. And history, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. Or even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic, fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. And that's where Hillsdale College comes into play, because our sponsor, Hillsdale College, they're offering more than 40 free, yes, that's right, free FREE online courses that include things like the Introduction to Free Market Economics, the Great American Story, A Land of Hope, the Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, and a handful of other courses that you can take for absolutely free. All of Hillsdale's colleges, they're self-paced so that you can start whenever you want to. You can tune in wherever you're at. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or you can just enjoy the lectures. So check it out here today. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There is no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. Hillsdale.edu/lockedon.
We all know that Bo Nix is making the Dean's List, but what about the other rookies in this Denver Broncos 2024 class? Where do they come in terms of their overall grade so far this season? Cody and I are going to break down our grades for the Denver Broncos 2024 rookie class at the bye week, as well as talk a little bit about maybe how some of these young players can get more and more involved over the final month of the season. But Broncos Country, thanks so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate you all out there who subscribe to the show and just rock with Cody and I every single day. You know that we got you covered, whatever happens with your favorite team, the Denver Broncos. So hit subscribe if you haven't already done so. Cody, let's talk about it. Like I said, Bo Nix, he's on the Dean's List, right? He's the valedictorian. He's the class factotum, whatever you want to say. I mean, he is it. Bo Nix is the leader of the class, obviously. And I think partly we grade on the curve of like, okay, what was the expectation coming into this season? Because we all have our like, hey, I think this guy's going to do this. I think he's going to be able to do this. Bo Nix has blown away anybody's wildest expectations so far this season.
Yeah, and look, I know we're going to do something that I particularly don't love doing, and I know Sean Payton hates. He hates grades. He hates grades. I honestly hate grades, but look, I think it's valuable to say, like, how can we talk about the progress measured and our thought process on these players? Like for Bo Nix, I mean, Sayre, the grade I gave him an A because, look, I think he has come in, he's exceeded the expectations. Now, look, I watched him for 2 years at Oregon because I'm a Ducks fan, right? And so from where I've seen him in Oregon to now, like we know the college game is so vastly different than the NFL game. How he's adjusted and adapted and what he's done to grow on a week-to-week basis has been impressive, right? You talk about it like early on in the season, you know, from a school standpoint, if we're talking about grading, you know, you're going to get your introduction, you're going to do your preliminary quiz, and then all of a sudden, then you're going to have your final. The final is not here yet, but I think the midterm, Bo Nix has done a really, really good job. And look, to the point, I'd say a large portion of this fan base now has belief and they're like, hey, we feel like Bo is the franchise quarterback for this franchise. And I think that right there is the only thing that matters here. How he's played, it's been an A. He's protected the football. He's done a really good job of growing inside this offense, and he's doing it without a good run game. And he's also doing it with young guys getting involved. It's guys that don't necessarily have a lot of experience. That right there, I think, is ultra impressive to me.
Yeah, I think you want to look at it in terms of grades. I have an A for Bo Nix as well, but let's talk about it in terms of like a group project, right? Because Bo Nix is coming in. He's replacing the guy who had been in the class for a long time. This is his first time in the NFL. Obviously, he's elevating the guys around him. He's the guy that you want to be like, all right, hey, I want to go be part of that guy's group project because I know that he's going to do a lot of the work and he's going to make me look good, right? But that's kind of how it feels like with Bo Nix right now, Cody. I mean, he's making everybody better. Cortland Sutton having his best season that he's had as a Bronco since 2019, for sure. You look at guys like Devon Vele, who we'll talk about, I know. Even Marvin Mims heating up right now. The offensive line, continuing to look better and better every single week. And we know Sean Payton's thoughts on sacks being a quarterback stat. Bo Nix has taken this offense to new heights. And you and I kind of dreamed about it in the offseason. Like, if a quarterback can do the bread and butter stuff, keep the intermediate passing game going, get the short passing game going, if that can happen, the Broncos could actually upgrade at QB with a rookie instead of Russell Wilson. I think we've seen that happen in 2024.
No, I think it's clear when you watch it. That's definitely been the case here. And Bo, I think, has so much more room to continue to grow and improve. And I'm excited to see how that's going to transpire here over the next 4 weeks here and potentially in the postseason if the Broncos find a way to get in there. And I'm very curious to see what playoff Bo Nix is going to look like and what this team is going to look like because of that. That's an exciting thing to watch for. Let's go to Jonah Ellis here. Obviously, a rotational role for him at the outside linebacker spot. Man, I've been very impressed with what I've seen from Jonah. Like, this is a guy who we know plays with a high motor. It feels like he's also getting better on a week-to-week basis. He's not a starter, but man, I think he's in a perfect spot for where he's at, considering what Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito are doing off the edge right now. And he's on a little bit of a sack streak as well. What is it? Three straight games he's had a sack in.
Yeah,
I'm going to give him a B+. Like, it's like I'd love to give him an A, but it's like, hey, like, I feel like that would just be like you're just giving him the mark because I have no complaints about Jonah Ellis. That's my thing. Like B+, I feel like is fair. It's good. It's not too biased. It's not too crazy. I think it's perfect for Jonah.
Yeah, I have the same grade for him as of right now, Cody. Obviously, a couple of those reps in coverage against the Raiders stand out. He gave up the touchdown to Amir Abdul. I know he was in great position, but get that head turned around, you might make an interception like Nick Bonito did. I know it wasn't the same type of play, but I think Jonah Ellis has so much potential for this Denver Broncos defense to be that number 3 guy off the edge, and he's going to be a huge factor down the stretch. I can't wait to continue talking about like what could his role become, because when you look at the numbers, I mean, there's some untapped potential there in terms of how the Broncos can utilize Jonah Ellis, although Drew Sanders now will be factoring into the mix, we hope. Let's go to Troy Franklin, Cody, because this is the first grade where you and I differ. I have Troy at a C. I'm going to explain why. I think early in the season and kind of towards the middle of the season, too many missed opportunities that you could say were Troy's faults. I know that a lot of this stuff is us sitting here and me being like, well, it's easy for me to say that the guy should make a catch, sprinting deep downfield or having to dive for the football deep downfield. But at the same time, I mean, that's difficult to do. But he is an NFL receiver. You look back at that, remember the Raiders game, where he had a clear, that was right before the little argument between Sean Payton and Bo Nix on the sideline. That pass that Troy Franklin went right through his hands. There's a few too many of those this season, which indicates to me like he's doing a good job of getting where he's supposed to be, or at least a good enough job of getting there. But you got to make the play once you get there. And he's doing better at that lately. But those missed opportunities on the deep ball, that's got me at right in the middle at a C.
I'm going to go with the B- here for him. And it's not based on it's not on production. We see the traits. I think the issue that I have with the Broncos offense when it comes to Troy Franklin, Sayre, has been the lack of just getting him the ball in the short yardage, right? In space, like drag, slants, crossers. Look, we've seen the deep shots. I love that. And eventually they're going to connect. I know you and I have been talking about that. But it's like, get him the ball in space. Like, for example, they ran an RPO against the Browns and Troy's got the speed to be able to take that and to get upfield. He almost scored. He got down to the 1 yard line here, but it's like that was, I thought the Browns defense, it was well blocked by Denver on the perimeter by Nate Atkins, Devon Vele, but it was also well attacked by the Browns defense as well. And Troy got skinny, got up the seam there. I would give him a B minus based on how defenses are trying to play from, because they are scared of getting beat deep by him. And now they're going to have to focus on being scared about not getting beat deep by Marvin Mims as well. When these two guys are on the field, the defense changes the way that they play the offense from a coverage standpoint. So that I would say that would be like the impact in terms of my grade that you don't necessarily see on the stat sheet. That's what I'll highlight there. Let's go rapid fire here. Chris Abrams drain. Loved what we saw from him on Monday Night Football, but I'm going to give it inconclusive sample size here. So we're not really going to give him one. I even feel like Audric Estime is a little inconclusive at this point, just because the sample size hasn't been where we need it to be. We see some flashes like, all right, hey, the student has some potential here, but inconclusive at this point. And then we'll rapid fire here as well. I got Devon Vele. I'm giving him a B plus there. I think his impact has been phenomenal. It's been a terrific blocker on the perimeter. What grade do you give Devon Vele?
I'm giving him an A, Cody. I mean, Devon has been one of those guys who's exceeding expectations, somebody that has become a major factor, maybe the number 2 receiver in this offense, as we've seen over the last handful of weeks, just the target share and things like that, the plays that he's been making. So I'm really high on Devon Vele. Kind of crazy that a week from today, as we're recording, the dude's already going to be 27 years old. But at the same time, you know what? You get your start in the NFL. When you get your start in the NFL, you make the most of your opportunity. He's a great player, and he's somebody that I think the Broncos can continue to utilize heavily.
Well, and speaking of utilization, Broncos Country, we're going to ask the questions too, offensively, defensively. How can the Broncos in these final 4 games utilize the rookies a little bit more down the stretch? Because they're going to need them in the future. How do you accelerate that a little bit? We'll tell you how here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at Mint Mobile. And with big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price that you thought you were going to be paying, it magically skyrockets, and that's frustrating. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at just $15 a month. All plans, they come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone and carry over all your existing contacts with a Mint Mobile plan. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. It is fourth quarter time here on the Locked On Broncos podcast, and we're going to highlight how Denver can get the rookies involved on offense and defense a little bit more in these final 4 games where, hey, it is crunch time. Playoffs on the line. Can the Broncos finally make it since 2015? Real quick, thanks to all the everydayers and first listeners in Broncos Country for making the show exactly what it is. We appreciate you. We love doing the show for you every single day. You always show up however you do, Broncos Country, and we're very grateful for that. Sayre, we were just handing out grades in terms of report cards for the first 13 weeks, but now with 4 weeks left in the regular season for the Broncos, 4 games to be exact here, how can the Broncos involve rookies more in the second half? I think primarily we should start this conversation here with Audric Estime. I really feel like Denver at this point needs to invest in the run game with Audric Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin as their primary 2 guys. Our good friend Nick Kosmider, The Athletic, kind of coined it as thunder and lightning. The run game, it needs to get going. And these are the 2 guys I feel like will be able to get it going a little bit in terms of consistency factor.
Right, and that would mean that Javonte Williams takes a back seat to both of those guys, and the reason for that is very simple. Other than the Atlanta Falcons game, you look over the last 4 games, there's 3 games in which Javonte Williams has a total of 13 carries for 0 yards. That's just it's unacceptable production at the NFL level for a running back. I know that nobody's probably more frustrated about that than Javonte, Cody, and obviously there's stories behind everything, but man, Jaleel McLaughlin ran well on Monday night. Audric Estime has, continued to do what he did at Notre Dame in terms of there's very few negative plays when that guy gets the ball. I mean, I think he had 3 in his final year at Notre Dame, and in terms of getting tackled behind the line of scrimmage. So that's a guy that you want out there creating yardage after contact. And I think when you get to this playoff run, you need somebody like Estime that can grind out those yards. Like the Broncos getting pinned deep against Cleveland. We talked about that in the lead up to the game, how important it was to get off the field quickly against Cleveland and win that field position battle. Losing the field position battle nearly cost the Broncos that game because they couldn't run the ball well. And if not for a 93-yard flip of the field with, to Marvin Mims, that really turned the tide of the entire game because the Broncos otherwise were going to give Cleveland another short field in that instance. And so you need to be able to run the ball. You need to be able to run out the clock and control time of possession. I think Estime is the guy that helps this Denver team do that.
I mean, I just don't. It's super frustrating because I don't know how many times we even saw it in the Cleveland game. It's 2nd and 2 or it's 3rd and 1, and the Broncos can't even pick that up. Like they can't get a run up the middle for 1 yard. You can't even get that. Like you watch some other teams run the ball, and teams that don't have great offenses, they still find a way to run the ball. I mean, pretty seemingly decent. Like there are some bad offenses there that have a really good run game, and that I think watching that's a little frustrating because the run game can make this Broncos offense significantly better. It can help out Bo Nix, and I think it could take a lot of pressure off of his shoulders there. And look, I'm not saying like we're bench Javonte in any way, shape, or form, but it's like see what you have with Estime and McLaughlin because right now they're the 2 guys that you feel like are going to be here in 2025. That's a guarantee. Javonte Williams' contract is expiring, so at this point, maybe put him in that Samaje Perine type of role, right? Where maybe he's in some passing situations. We know how good he's been in pass protection here, but at this point, the run game has to get going. And look, I know you and I have been talking about, hey, how can the Broncos do this, right? How can they look at Audric Estime? How can they look at Jaleel? Well, I think in the regular season, when you don't have a bye week until this late as the Broncos do, once your first game ends, you're automatically game planning for the next game. So it's like you can't really go in and make those widespread changes. Now with the bye week, Sean Payton and the coaching staff can go in and say, hey, our run game is not working. We need to see a little bit more touches. Sean's alluded to that with Audric Estime and Jaleel. That might mean this might be the week during the bye that the Broncos say, hey, now we're starting to game plan with Audric and Jaleel as the primary rushers here, and we'll come up with a role here for Javonte. But I don't think Javonte can be the primary ball carrier right now, and that's not anything against Javonte. It's just, hey, it hasn't been working, whether that's something from him not seeing it, whether it's just the Broncos run blocking on the offensive line not being consistent enough. It's a combination of things, not just solely on Javonte, but it can't keep going the way that it is, or else Denver isn't going to do anything. Like if they get to the postseason, that will be what does them in, not having a run game. I think that's so important here. I'm glad you highlighted those points here. Let's talk about Kris Abrams-Draine here for a second. Obviously, we'll obviously focus on the wide receivers, but Riley Moss, as we know, missed Monday Night Football, MCL injury. Denver missed him drastically. And it got so bad to the point with Levi Wallace that literally on the game-defining, the Broncos have a 34-32 lead, the game-defining drive where, hey, they could just kick a game-winning field goal and end it. You put the rookie cornerback who saw his first NFL action in the regular season in week 13, was a preseason stud. You put him in there, and there was just a different level of confidence with him. He didn't play scared. How can you get Kris Abrams-Draine involved more? Look, I think if Riley doesn't play, I don't know, and I wouldn't expect him to play against the Colts, to be honest with you. That's just my own speculation, but I'd say, like, if that's the case, I think Kris Abrams-Draine should get the reps here.
I do too. I think that there's no question. Everybody in Broncos country, I know that it's easy to play armchair GM a lot of times and say, well, cut this guy after a bad game. I just don't know how you can justify keeping Levi Wallace on the. In what capacity could you trust him to go out there at this point, Cody? I mean, that's really rough. I mean, it was one of the worst games that we've seen from a Broncos corner, and in that case, I just don't know. Can you even throw him out there in the dime package? Like you have Damari Mathis, he made an athletic play on David Njoku in that game. Kris Abrams-Draine was better on limited reps than what we saw from Levi Wallace, given all those chances, and so. I just don't know why you would go any other direction, especially if Riley Moss can't play. I would definitely say that he needs to be in the lineup over him 100% going forward if that is a necessity. Now, staying on the defensive side, Jonah Ellis coming off the edge, Cody, you look at his snap counts. I kind of teased this in the previous segment. You look at his snap count or snap percentage throughout the course of the season, it's been very, very consistent when we talk about between 30 and 40%. That's about what Jonah has played all year, is this 30 to 40% range. Do you think there's any chance that it increases as we get into this playoff run, especially with Drew Sanders coming back? I know we saw quite a bit of Dondre Tillman against the Cleveland Browns as well.
Loved it.
Broncos like that rotation, and I don't know if there's necessarily a need with the effectiveness per snap to really give Jonah too much more at this point.
Yeah, I to be honest with you, I don't think that Drew Sanders will play it down this season, even though he's on the active roster, unless there's an injury at outside linebacker. I honestly think that's more of an insurance policy for them than anything, is that they're bringing Drew along and he's doing great, but they're in a position right now, they're like, hey, Dondre Tillman's playing well. I mean, he had a TFL in the backfield and Nick Chubb suplexed him there. You know, he came up with a couple of big plays against the Browns. And then obviously you mentioned the impact Jonah Ellis has had. I do think it increases a little bit, but also it's like with the rate in which Jonathan Cooper, Nick Bonito, how they're playing, man, I think it makes it easier to keep those snaps at about 30% there for Jonah. It could elevate a little bit here, but I think Denver likes their personnel grouping as is. I don't think we see Drew Sanders, but I do think we could see a little bit of an uptick in Jonah Ellis here. You know, maybe to 32% is snaps if we can highlight it on a game-to-game basis. Last one we'll talk about here. You know, I think we highlighted this a little bit after the team released Josh Reynolds. We didn't expect that to happen. And look, that was, I think, a surprising move because we were like, all right, hey, Denver, you know, another offensive weapon can't hurt the Broncos at this point. But because of the direction they're going with Devon Vele, Marvin Mims, and even Troy Franklin now, these guys can get a little bit more involved. And I think when you look at the snaps and the targets, Sayre, these guys are getting more involved.
Absolutely. I mean, Devon Vele had been targeted 13 times over the last 2 games. Troy Franklin has 9 targets over the last 2 games. And quietly, Troy Franklin averaged 14 yards a catch against the Browns on Monday Night Football, and then 15.5 yards per catch against the Raiders in the week prior. Devon Vele, let's just quickly say something, Cody, because the stats are what everyone wants to talk about with Bo Nix and things like that. Dude was 1 yard away on 2 different plays from touchdowns to both Devon Vele and Troy Franklin. So I think we're going to continue to see those guys ramp up their involvement, and I'm excited for it. I think we're going to see the deep ball between Bo Nix and Troy Franklin hit, and maybe even Devon Vele as well. Let's get that guy some contested catch opportunities downfield.
Yeah, look, I think it was evident early on that Bo has chemistry with Devon Vele. We mentioned 8 catches on 8 targets in week 1 against the Seahawks. The target ramp up has increased, and obviously Cortland's seeing a lot of targets as well. But you know, with Devon Vele emerging as a little bit of that reliable number 2 option opposite of Court, it's been nice to see here for Bo. And look, we're seeing even Lucas Kroll get a little bit more involved here as of late. So what does Sean Payton have up his sleeve in these final 4 games? We said it, Broncos country. Denver controls their destiny, these final 4 opportunities that they're going to have. And we're going to learn a lot about this team in these final 4 games. We're excited about it and hope you stay with us here for the ride. If you're an everyday or first listener, we appreciate you so much. We'll be back tomorrow for another episode of the show. We'll highlight our biggest surprise from the Broncos in the first half of the season, biggest disappointment in the first half of the season, and what do we want to see them do in these final 4 games besides win? We'll dive deep into that and much more on tomorrow's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.